Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Critical Eye. Today we're going to be looking at the snatch cannon, the CORK-IN BACKOUT, the holy grail of tricking. I've been wanting to talk about this move for a while because there's actually a lot more than meets the eye. It reveals a lot of secrets about how double flips can be done in the easiest possible way. We're going to be looking at a big compilation of all of the different CORK-INs and categorizing them into different groups to help us really understand the best technique for this trick. So first off, let's get all the similarities out of the way. What are the things that all of these trickers are doing the same? They all finish their setup with their head and chest leaning forwards. This is going to allow them to block momentum out of that setup. The plant leg is pretty straight so that it can rebound through the floor rather than it bending and then trying to jump. Both arms are back and the swing leg is back. The hips are also sat backwards. That means that as they swing to take off, the hips can push forwards. And speaking of the takeoff, how does that work? Most of these trickers have their elbows above shoulder height. Some of them have their arms more out to the side than others, but in general, they have their elbows high in the takeoff. This is going to set their center of gravity nice and high, so they're flipping around a really high point and have enough time to get the snatch cannon done. None of them lean back too far in their takeoff, as this would cut their height. It can speed up flipping rotation, but you need a lot of height for this trick. All of them push their hips forwards as they swing. This is going to help them to block and reduce travel. It's also going to help them to flip faster and get more extension through the swing leg. And for the actual in-air rotation, pretty much all of them tuck in during their first cork, grabbing behind their knees. It's much easier to hold on to this undertuck than it is with an overtuck, so that's probably why they do this. There is one example of an overtuck, but this is quite rare. Nearly all of the CORK-IN backouts use an undertuck. So let's get into that succulent, juicy meat. The differences between these CORK-INs. I'm going to put them into 3 different categories to make things a lot simpler. So first off, you have your Class A CORK-IN BACKOUT. This is a CORK-IN BACKOUT where the BACKOUT is an actual backflip, pretty much. These are the creme de la creme of snatch cannons. You won't see them often. Ethan Turner falls into this category, James West falls into it. I think he has the most inverted CORK-IN BACKOUT that anyone has done, and Tim Farley pretty much falls into this category. Some of his CORK-INs fall more into the Class B category, but he's got some in the Class A. Next you have the Class B CORK-IN backouts, where the backout is still a flip, but it's more of a shan't. They're spotting over their shoulder in the direction they're twisting in that second flip and going somewhat around the side as they rotate. A lot of CORK-INs fall into this category. You have Alexander Anderson, Velu, Bailey Payne, and all of these guys as well. And both Shosei and Zen have done CORK-INs in this category, though most of theirs tend to be in the Class C category. Now, how does this one work? This is the category of CORK-IN BACKOUT that got me interested enough to make this video. This is a fairly new technique of double flipping that just didn't really exist 10 years ago. It makes combinations like this and this easily possible. Whereas if they were using the traditional technique, if it was a Class A, they'd probably struggle. A Class A version of these combos I'm sure will exist at some point. But using this Class C technique, it's much easier to achieve. So how does this technique work? What are the main differences? The main difference here is that before the second rotation starts, an extra 90 degrees of twisting rotation has already happened. You'll see that the first cork finishes an extra 90 degrees more than where it started. This means you can't really do a backflip out of it. What you're basically doing here is a late 9, but rather than extending a round kick or inside crescent, you're holding onto a tuck and changing your spot to look over the shoulder at the ground. By landing with your head below your hips, you create the illusion of a second flip, when there isn't really even the essence of a backflip in this CORK-IN BACKOUT. And I'm not saying this to be a hater and say these aren't cork-in backouts. Call them what you like. I think the technique is far more interesting than the name of this movement, as what this movement represents is a way to create the illusion of a double flip without taking on the risk and the difficulty of performing a real double flip. Here's a bunch of new tricks that appear to be double flips, but these are really achieved by keeping the head and chest tight into the landing leg so that you land with your head beneath your hips. This makes us see two flips, as we see the head drop below hip height, the head rise to above hip height again, and then we see the head drop below hip height again, and then they stand up afterwards. So this tricks us into thinking that two flips have happened. So enough about what these techniques are. How do they actually work? How do you turn a cork late 9 into a Class C cork-in back out? It starts from the takeoff. You'll notice in all of these examples, the hips are turned somewhere between 45 and 90 degrees into the direction we're twisting before leaving the ground. This makes it much easier to finish that first cork with an extra 90 degrees of rotation, as you've already cut off some of your twisting rotation at the start. It also throws the trigger more off axis. If you've seen the Ultimate Cork Guide, then you'll know this is the takeoff for a floaty cork, which is a very high set cork that doesn't invert too much and naturally over rotates. This is the type of cork you're gonna wanna do for a Class C snatch cannon. But how do you give the illusion of a double flip? One key thing to pay attention to is that the knee on the plant leg side is always pulled much higher and tighter into the chest than the other knee. What you're essentially doing from this position is completing 3/4 of a twist round to your complete landing position. But you want this 3/4 of a twist to look like a flip. So by pulling that plant leg tight into your chest, the trigger's able to get onto more of a horizontal axis. If it was extended, then this would very much look like the late 9 variation. Spotting the ground alone isn't enough to put you on more of a horizontal in the air. Whereas if you spot the ground and pull that knee in, then you can really give the illusion of more of a flip. This is a really tricky one to explain, so I'm going to try and show it to you with visual aids as best I can. It means that the end of this trick is likely going to feel much more like a cork late 9 variation than it feels like a full in back out. On to those Class B cork-ins. These are the ones that should definitely be considered cork-in back outs, but they don't flip straight over their head in that second rotation. There's still quite a bit of hip turn in the takeoff for these cork-in back outs, sometimes coming up to around 90 degrees, but generally a little less than the Class C takeoffs. Let's compare two examples of Shosei doing cork-in back outs. One of these is a Class C cork-in and the other one is a Class B. You'll notice in the Class B, his hips don't turn anywhere near as much in the takeoff. That means that by the time he finishes the cork and starts going into that second rotation, his hips aren't turned anywhere near as much. So even though he still spots over his shoulder, he still raises that plant leg higher than the other one, the second rotation looks like much more of a flip due to this change in starting position. Though in all of these Class B cork-ins, they do spot over their shoulder in the direction they're twisting all the way through that second flip. If you're spotting over your shoulder in a backflip, you won't be able to go straight over your head. You can try this for yourself, just in a standing back tuck. Try looking at the ground over your shoulder, all the way from the takeoff to the landing. It will force you to go slightly off axis, and it should make the backflip feel a little easier. What about those dangerous Class A cork-ins? As you might have guessed, they turn the hips less in the takeoff, somewhere between swinging straight forwards and turning around 45 degrees. None of these examples are turning their hips 90 degrees in the takeoff, as that would make it really hard for them to go straight over their head in the second rotation. So what happens after that first cork in a Class A cork-in back out? They finish the cork facing the same way they started off facing. There's no extra rotation in this kind of cork-in back out, as you simply wouldn't be able to go over your head. The spotting also makes a huge difference. They try to look straight over their head rather than over their shoulder. This allows them to go straight over their head, just like you would in a standing back tuck. Another key difference that's a little harder to notice is that they pull in the swing leg almost as much as the plant leg. There's a slight difference, as it's going to be easier to get your plant leg higher into your chest just because of the way a cork works. But in these examples, you'll see that the knee on the swing leg side kind of catches up to the plant leg side. This allows them to do a true backflip going straight over their head, as if you have one knee pulled in more than the other, you're going to go more off axis. By pulling in the knee on the swing leg side towards their shoulder, they're going to flip that side of their body. So the second rotation is going to come out much more like an actual flip rather than a twist where you're looking over your shoulder the whole time. I hope this video helps you to understand pseudo double flips a little more as a whole. I do want to do a huge video on pseudo double flipping in the future, so you can look out for that one. And again, this video is not to discredit anyone who does these Class C cork-in back outs. I think that they look cool. I like them to the point where I'm trying to learn this move that way, because it's much safer and easier. So no hating on that. Don't go commenting on people's videos saying your cork-in's Class C. Sort yourself out. Be nice. It's still hard to do any kind of cork-in back out. One big benefit of these Class C cork-ins is that due to their existence, we've seen a bunch of cork-in back out combos. These combos inspire other trickers to do their own cork-in back outs, which might end up being Class A ones. So by hitting Class C cork-ins from all these different setups, it shows people a really inverted one is probably going to be possible too. Who knows how long it would have been for someone to do double full swing cork-in back out if they were trying to do it straight over their head. That would be far more dangerous and a lot harder. So I think there's a lot of value to doing them this way. And I think the techniques used here can be used to create a bunch of other brand new flips that we've never seen before. So experiment, try and play with some pseudo flips yourself, see what you can come up with. I hope you enjoyed this one. Even if you're not chasing cork-in back out, it's a pretty advanced trick. I hope you still gained something from this video. And you had a good time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.